Hi everyone, welcome back. And here we have another interesting ASMR Great Empire video. And today it's Germany's turn. We're gonna talk about the German colonial empire. Well, while the German colonial empire was relatively short-lived and less expensive compared to the other European powers, there are some lesser known facts which I'm gonna start with. For example, the experimentation with agricultural practices. In German East Africa, German settlers experimented with agricultural practices, introducing crops such sisal, cotton, and coffee. These experimentations aim to promote economic development of the colonies. Another less known fact is the development of railway in East Africa. Well, as a colonial empire, Germany invested in the construction of railways in German East Africa, connecting the interior to the coast. Usambara Railway, for example, which was used to transport goods and people. Camel crops in the German Southwest Africa. Well, during the Herero and Nama uprising, the German Southwest Africa, which is Namibia, the Germans employed a camel corps. This unit used camels for transport and patrolling. The German Pacific warning system. Well, yes. In the early 20th century, the German colonial administration in Samoa established a rudimentary tsunami warning system. This system includes a series of telephone lines and sirens to warn the population of potential tsunamis, and that was in the 1900s. Well, now, let's talk about the German colonial empire, because this started unified in the early 1870. The chancellors of the time period was Otto von Bismarck. So, Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck resisted first the pressure to construct a colonial empire until the scramble of Africa in 1884. Claiming much of the remaining uncolonized areas of Africa, Germany built the third largest colonial empire at the time, after British and France. We're gonna talk at the end of the 1800s and the start of the 1900s. The German colonial empire encompassed past parts of several African countries: Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Namibia, which are in the present day, Chad, Nigeria, Togo, and Ghana. But Germany lost control of most of its colonial empire at the beginning of the First War in the 1914. But some German forces held out German East Africa until the end of the war. After the German defeat in the World War I, Germany's colonial empire was officially confiscated as the part of Treaty of Versailles between the German and the Weimar, the Allies and the German Weimar Republic. But now we're gonna talk some colonies which belonged to the Germany before the start of the colonial empire. And those colonies were in the South America. So we have the Klein Venedig and Planet Hanoish Indian. Well, let's talk about the Klein Venedig, which means the Little Venedig or Welserland was the most significant territory of German colonization in Africa. It lasted from 1588 to 1546, in which Welser banking and patrician family of the free imperial cities of Augsburg and Nuremberg obtained colonial rights in the province of Venezuela in return for debts owed by the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who was also the King of Spain at that point. The next is the Hanoish Indian. The counties of Hanau-Lichtenberg and Haunan-Münzenberg under the Friedrich Casimir and his advisor founded but did not complete an extravagant program to lease Guyana from the Dutch. From the Dutch West India Company, calling his new realm Hanoish Indian or Hanoish Indias. Frederick Casimir ran up huge debts that ultimately forced him into a regency by his relatives. So this was only an ambition, a claim, but was never fulfilled. Okay, so these two colonies where they belonged to Germany before the official German colonial empire. And now let's talk about the establishment of the empire, which the first step was from 1884 until 1890. Good. What happens? Well, in 1884, Otto von Bismarck consented to the acquisitions of colonies by German Empire, but that only to protect the trade of the safeguard and raw materials from the markets. Following 1884, Germany invaded a few African countries. For example, German East Africa, which is in present day it's the territory of Burundi, Rwanda, and Tanzania. German South Africa, which is Namibia, and German Cameroon, including parts of the present-day Gabon, Congo, and Central African Republic, and Togoland. Well, Germany was also at that point active in the Pacific, annexing a series of islands that will be called German New Guinea. German New Guinea. Here, this area, which is part present day of Papua New Guinea and some Micronesia and Melanesia archipelago. The northeastern regions of the island of New Guinea was called Kaiser Wilhelm's Land. The Bismarck archipelago to the island. Next, it's the colonization under the Otto von Bismarck. In 1880, Bismarck would unsuccessfully attempt to annex Samoa, which is right here, Samoa, the Western Solomon Islands, and the Western Solomon Islands, following the British model. Bismarck placed many possessions of German merchants under the protection of German Empire. In 1885, the German flag was raised in Cap Taikoba in the West African coast. In April 1885, the brothers Clemens and Gustav Den Hart acquired Vitoland in modern Kenya. With this, the first wave of German colonial acquisition was largely completed. In 1885, the Marshall Islands were also claimed, and finally several of the Solomon Islands. In 1888, Germany ended the civil war on Nauru, which is here, and annexed the island. But after this wave of colonization, what happened next? Well, that was a stop to the colonial acquisition. That was stop between 1888 and 1890. So for 2 years. After 1885, Bismarck opposed further colonial acquisitions and maintained his policy focus on maintaining good relations with the great powers. At that point were only England and France. In 1889, Bismarck considered withdrawing Germany from colonial policy, wishing entirely to end Germans' colonial wave activities in East Africa only and Samoa. Bismarck also used and found that colonies are useful as bargaining chips. Thus, the Congo Conference held in Berlin, he divided Africa up to the great powers. After Bismarck had ended the policy of colonial acquisition in March 1890, he concluded that the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty with Britain, in which Germany renounced all remaining claims north of German East Africa, In this way, he established a balance between Great Britain and France, renouncing the German claims to the Somali coast. This one. The next was the colonial empire under the Kaiser Wilhelm III. Well, Wilhelm III was keen for Germany to expand its colonial holdings. Bismarck's immediate successor in the 1890, Leo Funcaprivi, was willing to maintain the colonial burden of what already existed, but opposed new ventures. After 1890, Germany succeeded of acquiring only relative minor territories. One of them was King China, Hankow, and Tianjin. Yeah. And Wuhan, Tianjin. Through the German-Spanish Treaty in 1899, Germany acquired Caroline Islands and Mariana Islands. Through the Tripartite Convention of 1899, the west part of Samoa Island became a German protectorate. Well, during the Agadir crisis in 1911, the German government attempted to get the whole French Congo as compensation for German recognition of the French protectorate in Morocco. In the end, they were given parts of the northwest French Congo. This led to an increasing isolation of Germany among the great powers. But the new colonial era started in 1905. New colonial era. Well, as a result of colonial wars in Southwest Africa and East Africa, which had been caused by poor treatment of native people, it was considered necessary to change the German colonial empire administration in favor of a more scientific approach to the colonies and to improve the lives of people in them. Every colony in Africa and Pacific established the beginnings of a public school system. Public school system. And every colony built staffed hospitals. In some colonies, native agricultural holdings were encouraged and supported. Thus, this had consequences on the long term because there were no further major revolts in the German colonies after 1905. And as a result, the economic efficiency of the overseas possession increased. Between 1906 and 1914, the production of palm oil and cocoa in the colonies doubled. The rubber production in Africa quadrupled. Another step was that the colonies were romanticized. Geologists and cartographers explored what were then unmarked regions of the European marks, identifying new areas, mountains and rivers, and demarcating boundaries for maps production. And the 1940 arrived. Once the First War was declared in late July 1940, Britain and its allies promptly moved against the colonies. The public was informed that German colonies were a threat because every German colony has a powerful wireless station. The German overseas colonies began to fall one by one to the Allied forces. The first to go was Togoland, right here. To the British and the French, then the Camerons to the French. Germany's colonized, put up to stood fight in 1960, and Germany lost most of its colonies except the German East Africa. In the Pacific, Britain's ally, Japan, declared war on Germany in 1940 and quickly seized several German colonies. Germany's overseas empire was dismantled following the defeat in World War I. With the concluding Treaty of Versailles, the Article 22, German colonies were transformed into League of Nations. League of Nations. After World War I, mandates and divided between Belgium, United Kingdom, and certain British dominions to the France and Japan. In Africa, the United Kingdom and France divided the German Cameroon and Togoland. Belgium gained Rwanda and Urundi. And in northwest, German East Africa part. In the Pacific, Japan gained Germany's islands north of Equator, the Marshall Islands, the Carolines, the Marianas, and the Palau. German Samoa was assigned to New Zealand, and German New Guinea to the Bismarck archipelago, and Nauru was independent. And that was the end of the colonial empire of Germany. But what about the relationship between German and indigenous people? This is the next chapter we're gonna talk? Well, the German colonizer conceived of the indigenous people as children, people at lower level of development who had to be protected, educated, and raised up. That's why Germans sent missionary and established missionary societies were already concerning themselves with education and conservation of overseas population. The missionary societies established in the colonies were to instruct the indigenous people basic education, modern agricultural techniques, and spread Christianity. The impact of indigenous people, they were also negative impact because German colonization had detrimental effects, especially in Africa. Exploitative labor practices, forced labors, and violence. Another fact is the economic development, limited economic success. While Germany's colonial ventures were not as economically successful as those from other European nations like France and British, there were challenges in managing and profiting from the colonies. Next fact is introduction of the German culture. Some positive aspects include the introduction of German language, education, and certain aspects of the culture in the colonies. The post-World War I effects. World War I effects. Well, loss of the colonies after Germany's defeat in the World War I. The Treaty of Versailles led to the loss of its colonies. The League of Nations, the new created League of Nations, granted mandates over former German territories to the other Allied power. And that was a good fact because the other Allied power took control over German colonies and over the management and the productions. In recent years, there has been growing recognition of the need of the reparations and restitutions for the atrocities committed during the colonial period. Discussions have taken place regarding acknowledgement and compensation for victims in their descendants. Historical memory and educations. Germany has engaged in efforts to acknowledge its colonial past, including public discussions, memorializations, and educational initiatives. This is a part of a broader global movement towards recognizing and addressing the legacies of colonialism. This is also part of the legacy of the German colonial empire. Right. Also here on the map, with dark gray, we have the climate planned or proposed. So, climate planned or proposed colonies of the German Empire. And we have the Togo hinterlands, Gurma and Grando, Katanga territories right here, we talk about the German Somal coast and the southwestern of Madagascar. But also they were claimed territories in Antarctica. Fjellnardon ice shelf, Prince Regent, Luitpold Land, the New Swabia in Antarctica, and Kaiser Wilhelm II land. But these were only claimed territories. Alright, very interesting session, right, of the German colonial empire. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I, and thank you very much for watching. And until next time, I wish you all the best. Bye bye.